In this video, we'll learn how to read a graph to determine maximum and minimum values of a function. The point where a function changes from increasing to decreasing and vice versa is called a turning point of a graph. A turning point is where we find a relative maximum or minimum, as it is the highest or lowest point relative to the points around it. In other words, this is where we will find the peaks and valleys of graphs. So a function has a relative, or sometimes called local maximum, at x equals b if there exists an interval around b such that f of b is greater than f of x for any x in the interval a to c. So that is, if there is a x value b such that this y value f of b is greater than any other y values around it, then we see that we have a local maximum. And that local max is actually the f of b value. It's always the y value. So it occurs at x equals b, but the f of b is the actual maximum. A relative minimum then is if there is an x value b in an interval from a to c such that f of b is less than f of x for any x in the interval a to c. So in other words, here, if we have an x value b, then f of b is the smallest y value around this point b. So if we want to determine the relative maxima and the relative minima, that's just a plural of maximum and minimum, of the function shown in the figure, the graph starts in the left, that is in the second quadrant, and it goes down through negative 4.5, 0, and then continues downward to negative 3.02, negative 4.4. Then the graph goes up through the point negative 1, 0, and continues up until we get to the point 1.12, 5.04, and then it turns downward through 2.70 and continues downward. There's a few things going on that I just want to review. First of all, there are two turning points, because notice that even though we're not doing the increasing, decreasing intervals, which we just talked about in a previous video, but the graph is decreasing until we get to this bottom point, and then it turns to increasing. And then it goes to this highest point, and then it turns down again to decreasing. According to our definitions, these turning points are where we can find our relative maximum or minimum points. And like I said before, they are the peaks and the valleys of the graph. So the relative maxima, or maximum in this case, we just have one. We want to find the point that is the highest point around others in the area. So this point 1.12, 5.04 is a high point of the graph. It's not the highest point because there's actually no highest point because the graph continues upward to infinity, though we can't see it here. But in this particular neighborhood, this 1.12, 5.04 is a high point. And so we say that there is a relative maximum of 5.04 at x equals 1.12. And there is a relative minimum At this low point, negative 3.02, negative 4.4. So the relative minimum is that y value, that smallest y value in that neighborhood, which is negative 4.4, but it occurs at x equals negative 3.02. So the only 2 points we were concerned with here were these high and low points, that is the turning points where it changed from decreasing to increasing and vice versa. And then the relative max or min is the y value of those highest or lowest points. Let me know if you have questions on this concept. Thanks.